We are in a good spot as Sony mirrorless video shooters, in that we have a lot of choices when it comes to lenses. So many that I couldn't possibly cover them all, but in this video I wanted to compare two 35mm primes. On one hand, the budget option, the FE 35mm f1.8, in the other hand, the more premium option, the 35mm f1.4 G Master. The main roll, the talking head portions of this video were shot with the Sigma 24-70 f2.8 DGDN at 35mm. Check the chapter markers if you want to skip around. I'm going to try to be relatively thorough in comparing these two lenses without getting overly technical or charty. As for price, the 1.8 retails for around $750 US, and the G Master retails for around $1,400 US. The G Master weighs 1.2 pounds or 524 grams, while the 1.8 weighs in at 9.9 ounces or 281 grams. Just like it's almost twice the cost, it's almost twice the weight as well. The G Master, that is. The G Master has an 11-bladed diaphragm, rounded aperture blades, whereas the 1.8 only has 9 rounded aperture blades. The G Master has 2 linear XD focusing motors, and the 1.8 only has 1 linear XD focusing motor. The G Master has a 67mm front filter diameter, whereas the 1.8 has a 55mm front filter diameter. Minimum focusing distance on both of these lenses is quite close. The 1.8 comes in at 8.7 inches or 22.1 centimeters, while the G Master can focus down to 9.8 inches or about 25 centimeters. Let's talk about physical features and design of the two lenses. The FE 1.8 is a much simpler design. It has a programmable button that defaults to focus hold, and there is an AF/MF switch on here. That's pretty much it. Build quality on these lenses on the 35 f1.8 is pretty nice. I don't really know what this material is. Sony doesn't really talk about the materials of the lenses on their product pages. It feels like plastic. It's not like a cheap feeling plastic. It almost feels like it's metal of some kind. It's lightweight. It feels sturdy and durable. You don't really have any complaints necessarily about the build quality of this lens. There is a thin rubber gasket on the lens mount, and Sony's product page indicates that there are some gaskets throughout the lens in order to help with weather resistance. I don't know that it's quite weather sealed per se, but it is moisture and dust resistant to some degree, which is a good thing. The focus ring is nicely damped. I like the amount of resistance to it. It's very smooth. There's no real like grittiness or any like weird spots in it. The surface of it is kind of this knurled metal plastic finish. As for the G Master, it has a few more physical features on it. It does have the same focus hold button that's programmable to different functions if you want, an AF/MF switch. This also has an aperture ring on it, and there's a switch that you can switch from having it click into place so it clicks every 1/3 stop, or you can flip the switch to make the aperture ring smooth. You can also rotate the aperture ring to this A position or automatic, and that way you can just control the aperture with your camera dial as you would the f1.8 version. There is also a weather sealing gasket at the mount, and Sony's product page also indicates that it has weather sealing throughout the lens to a greater degree than the 1.8 does. As far as materials and build quality, it's also plastic, but it feels, again, very high quality, very well made, very robust feeling. The surface on this one is not quite so prone to picking up the oils from your fingers. It's kind of a more textured feel to it. The focus ring is rubberized, so it has a lot more grip to it than the 1.8 version. It's also very smooth, but it's also a little bit lighter to turn than the 1.8. It's worth noting that for manual focus, both of these lenses are focused by wire, and both of these lenses have linear manual focus, which means that regardless of how fast or how slowly you spin the focus ring, you're going to get the same like kind of repeatable focus pulls. It's much more comparable to your focusing experience on an older analog or mechanical focusing system. Now let's just take a look at some different image quality characteristics between the two lenses. I don't want to get overly technical and do any kind of pixel peeping because I just don't think it's that important for video shooters in particular. All the comparison footage in this video was shot with the A7S III. I used S-Log3 and S-Gamut3.Cine. You can probably tell that the f1.8 is a little bit warmer than the G Master, which renders things slightly bluer, slightly cooler than the f1.8. In this little series of shots here, I was actually trying to show the difference in light gathering between 1.4 and 1.8, but the sun just started coming through at just the right angle and just massively flaring these lenses. So this ended up being more of a flare comparison. I will say that if you're trying to control for flares, the lens hood on the G Master did a much better job of actually cutting this flare out, whereas the pedal style hood on the 1.8 didn't really do anything at all. All right, so the G Master wins for hood design. I'm kind of a sucker for Sunstars, so I shot a lot of the test footage that you see at f11, and I think the G Master renders kind of a cleaner, sharper looking Sunstar. The f1.8 is a little blurrier, but maybe has a kind of a characteristic to it that you might appreciate. One of the big advantages of the cheaper FE 1.8 lens is the lack of focus breathing. And for video shooters, that might be kind of end of story right there. You just go for the cheaper lens because it doesn't have any focus breathing. The G Master, on the other hand, focus breathes quite a bit. So anybody who's not using the A7 IV with that breathing compensation and the FX6, which I think has it now, is going to have to accept the focus breathing on the G Master. So what's the verdict here? It's really hard for me to decide for myself. I actually have both of these lenses, and I was thinking when I got the G Master that I was going to go ahead and sell the f1.8, but I've actually, just hung on to it for the last couple months. I've been using the G Master exclusively for my YouTube videos, my talking head stuff, and I really love the way it looks. I think it looks awesome. I like the 1.4. I mean, just for that like kind of excessive shallow depth of field look. But I was also really happy with this as a talking head YouTube video lens as well. I think one of my most favorite YouTube videos that I've ever shot was shot with this one. Video quality, I don't think you can go wrong with either of these lenses. It really just comes down to what you prioritize. Obviously the 1.8 is almost half the price of the G Master. Not only that, it has something that I think is really sought after for video shooters in that it has no focus breathing. You can see in those comparisons that the G Master focus breathing is quite obtrusive, it's quite obvious. Not only that, when you are close focusing with the G Master, the shot is much tighter, the framing is much tighter, it's zoomed in comparison to the 35 f1.8. I love the G Master. I'm going to keep the G Master, I'm going to keep using it. But I can really see that the focus breathing is kind of obnoxious. And if you don't have the A7 IV or the FX6, which has that breathing compensation, but even so, you're looking at, a not insignificant crop into the image in order to get rid of that focus breathing. Whereas this lens, you keep the true 35mm field of view and you don't have the focus breathing. I don't know. I think that's pretty crucial for video. On the other hand, what I really do love about the G Master, or what I find valuable, is the additional physical features of it, namely the aperture ring, the bigger size, the weight, the bigger front filter element. All those things make it easier and actually more enjoyable to shoot with in terms of video use. At the end of the day, it's a good problem to have. These are two excellent 35mm primes from Sony for the Sony E-mount system. There's obviously a lot of third-party options that I can't cover in this video. There's also zoom lenses that cover 35, so you really have no shortage of options. I just hope I was able to give you some clarity in terms of these two lenses, so let me know what you think. I really appreciate you watching the video. Maybe I'll see you in the next one.